you can be the one who is strong and courageous and who stands up to your enemy in those times of battle and fights as a warrior created by God. You are a spiritual warrior. Don't settle for anything less. Today I want to talk to you as we continue this series about warrior being on the front lines. And as we talk about, all these battles and different things that we go through, this morning I want to talk to you about distractions. I want to talk to you about being a distracted warrior. Distractions are a part of life. It can be anything, little bitty things. Usually the smallest distractions lead to the biggest problems. It just really does. Or the biggest annoyances, flies and mosquitoes. Drive you nuts. Just literally drive you nuts. And I'd worked late one night last week, and it was almost dark, and Lacey was at school, and so I just kind of wanted a moment to kind of just relax and just kind of pray and go through some things in my mind. I ended up having one of my fishing poles in my car, so I just jumped in my cart and drove down to the lake there at the golf course, and I was fishing a little bit, and things were going pretty well, and I was catching a few, and I was just having a beautiful moment, and then all of a sudden this stinking mosquito starts flying around my head. I mean a big one too, there, big old jet thing buzzing, you can hear it, you can see it, and it's like it's looking at you with those little beady eyes going, I got you. But I'd swat at it, and it was distracting. It totally took me out of my God mood right there. Something so small, just so distracting. But those little distractions, isn't it crazy how they just get our mind off of the things that we want our mind to be on and get our life so easily messed up? It's one of our greatest weaknesses as warriors. Ladies, have you ever noticed how a man can so easily be distracted when you're talking to him? I mean, you're telling him the most important thing that is going on. Doesn't really matter what it is, it's important. But you're telling it to him, and you know what? And it's just, he can be thinking about the moon. He can be thinking about fishing or hunting or food plots or whatever. Just easily distracted. But you know what, guys? We're pretty blessed. We have this gift. It's almost spiritual. I said almost. That it doesn't matter what they're saying, what we're thinking, where we are. Somehow we can recall the last 5 words that she spoke. And when she says, do you know what I'm talking? Are you listening to me? Well, of course I'm listening to you. Well, what did I say? And we spit those last 5 words out, thinking that's going to keep us out of trouble. And it doesn't work because they usually end up asking for words 6 or 7. And we're like, whoa. Easily distracted. Before we go into much farther, let's go back to Ephesians 6, chapter 12. Let's read our verse for this series. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood. Our struggles and our battles are not against people. Now, Satan will try to make it that way. He'll try to bring those people right in, and he'll try to suck us into believing that they're the problem, they're the issue, whatever. But right, the root of our battles is not found in people, okay? But it's found against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms, okay? So we got to get that, where our battles are, the root of this battle, that's where it comes from. And today, once again, we want to remember that every warrior has a cause to fight for, but sometimes, so sadly, we lose some important battles because we're so easily distracted. I want to go to 1 John chapter 2. I'm going to read this out of the New American Standard Version first. I'm going to come back in a different version of the Bible here in a little bit that probably will sound a little more like what you would expect it to hear. But let's start with this in chapter 2 and verse 14. He says, I write to the young men because you are strong, and the word of God, it lives in you, and you have overcome the evil one. And in this particular set of verses, he starts right off patting these people on the back. I mean, he's saying, you're doing a good job. You are strong. You're full of courage, and you've even whipped the devil, at some times, and you've got this all going on. But then right in the next breath, he kind of shifts gears. And this happens a lot. We get built up to kind of feel pretty good about ourselves, only to be faced with some really tough truth or this really, just a tough reality. And this is what happens. And he says, just continuing on, he says, but wait, be very aware because you are so vulnerable to worldly distractions. He says, do not love the world or anything in the world. And this is really where it gets really tough right here. And it's what we need to know. But he says it. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. Now that's one of those verses that just makes a room go cricket chirping silent. Do not love the world or anything in it. Because if anyone loves the world, then the love of the Father is not in them. So, just like that, he goes from, oh, you're doing awesome. If you're loving the world, you ain't got it going on. True Scripture. We can be incredibly on track pursuing God. And then all of a sudden, we can become so slightly distracted, that little spiritual mosquito or fly, that little fiery dart that Satan slings at us, causes a distraction, and before long, we fall head over heels in love with the things of this world. And then he goes on to unpack this a little bit for us in verse 16. He says, for everything in the world, the cravings of sinful man, the lust of the eyes, and the boasting of what he has and does, it doesn't come from the Father, but from the world. And then he says, you have to remember this. You have to internalize it. The world and its desires will pass away, but the man who does the will of God will live forever. As I think of these little distractions, because the Bible references the fiery darts of the evil one and how he'll sling them. And I don't picture them necessarily as, some big, huge bow with this big, huge arrow that just takes us out. And I picture like these little darts from a blowgun. That's what I picture. And I picture him, kind of waiting for that right moment, and he kind of sees us in that moment, and everything's going good in our life, and and it's just in that moment our eyes, get off of what kind of is good in our life and gets off of God, and we're distracted just for that moment. And then just in that moment, he gets us. And then we become, we give it a second glance, and then before too long, that simple little distraction has led us down a road that we never intended to go down. And it just took one little simple distraction. We need to understand that God has a divine cause, a heavenly cause for us. We're a warrior with a cause. Distracted warriors abandon the heavenly in pursuit of the earthly. It's what happens over and over and over again. We abandon the divine cause and instead begin living for things, that are of this world. We fall in love with them and then rather than the things of the kingdom of God. And Paul addresses this with Timothy in 2 Timothy 4. He says, no one serving as a soldier or a warrior gets involved in civilian affairs or gets involved in things that they're not supposed to. You have orders. And it says, because he wants to please his commanding officer. If we think of ourselves as spiritual warriors in this fight, the things that we do in this life should be to please our commanding officer, who is Jesus Christ. Now, if you think about it in a military sense, a soldier is given orders, and they are expected to follow those orders, whether they agree with it or not, whether they like it or not. They're given orders, they follow those orders. If they don't follow those orders, there's consequences, correct? Now, I don't like to sit here and think of God or Jesus as being this, drill sergeant, yelling and screaming in our face. That's not who he is. However, he does give us direction. He does give us kind of shows us some things in his will for our lives, and we're expected to follow that, to please our commanding officer. But as we continue to travel sometimes, we start off with one little distraction. We get a little off track. And then over time, we end up very, very far from where God intends for us to be because we get so easily distracted. by the things of this world. One reason I think that's true is because we're warriors, we want to conquer, we want to win, we want to keep score. And it's really hard to keep score in a spiritual way of thinking. In the spiritual world, it's really, how do we know really? What is there to gauge by? Am I winning? Am I losing? How am I doing? Because sometimes when we're winning, it really seems like we're losing, doesn't it? Because sometimes when God's doing really big things in our life and we don't see it, we see the tough things and we see, the battles, we see all this stuff. We don't see, the good things that God is doing in us and through us. So it's really hard to gauge sometimes how we're doing. How am I doing? For example, you will not see a man come home from work one day and say, honey, guess what? You're not going to believe this, but today they were handing out spiritual awards at work. And I won the most humble award. I did. I'm the most humble. I am. Nobody else. Me. And then pride slips in. Or this. You will not see the husband come home from Connect Group. Which, by the way, I hope some of you are attending tonight. All of you. But you will not see a man come home from Connect Group and say, did you hear that prayer, baby? That was awesome. I closed that thing out in style. Even the guys, they give me a rating of 9.25. I was thinking I had an 8.5 at best. But they give me a 9.25, and now I'm banking for a 9.5 next week. You're just not going to see that. We're not, that's not something that we necessarily have that gauge on. So spiritually, it's hard to keep score. But the world, it makes it easy. Can I tell you how much money I made last year? Not much. But can I tell you? You want to know how much money I made last week? How much did you make? Well, I made this much. See my house? See my car? See my truck? See my boat? See my clothes? See my purse? See my shoes? The world gives us an easy way to think that we've got it all going on. To keep score, to go through, and it's just, it's easy for us to do. Look at me, I got this, look at that. Spiritually, it's difficult, but we're drawn to this place that we can keep score, that we can measure how we're doing. And that's why our enemy attacks us that way. I believe that. Gets us off track to fall in love with this world. The more in love you are with the world, the less in love with God you will be. That's the whole intention of him. Really think about it. If he gets us off that, if he gets us away from this upward relationship, if that is non-existent, the outward relationship is not going to happen. We will fall in love with the wrong things, which will send us down the wrong paths. So I want to break this down. I'm going to go back and I'm going to read verse 16 in the good old King James this morning. And when I read this, most of you then will understand where this was from if you haven't already got it. And it's this. For all that is in the world, help me out. What's the first one? The what? And the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life. This morning, if you let me, I want to take you just really quickly and I'm just going to say that every distraction that you will face in your life can be placed in one of these three areas. Now, they may look different, but in some way, form, or fashion, the enemy will attack you and distract you with the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, or the pride of life. It's a threefold attack. We see an example of that attack that Satan gave Jesus after he fasted for 40 days in the wilderness. And so Satan shows up, and he begins right real quickly because the Bible, he's weak and he fasted for 40 days, hadn't, eaten anything. He was probably very weak, physically. And Satan jumps up immediately and attacks him with the lust of the flesh. He says, you hungry, Jesus? Are you hungry? You want some food? Is your flesh hungry? Well, then turn these stones into bread and obey those fleshly desires. He says, obey him, Jesus. I know you're hungry. And Jesus says, no way. He says, no, that's not how it goes. He said, it's written, man doesn't live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of God. So the lust of the flesh doesn't work. So he jumps right on over to the pride of life. And he attacks him. And he says, why don't you do this, Jesus? Why don't you go get God to serve you instead of you serving him? Because it's all about you anyways. Why don't you jump off the edge of this cliff, let his angels catch you, because it's all about you, Jesus. And so he attacks him with this pride of life. But Jesus quickly says, it's written, man shall not put the Lord your God to test. And he fights him off again. But then he comes back again with the lust of the eyes. He says, Jesus, look around. Look at all the kingdoms of the world. Can you see them with your eyes? You want them, don't you, Jesus? I mean, look at this. And you can have every bit of this. And it looks good. And you want it, don't you? All you have to do is bow down and worship me for just a moment. And you can have everything that you see with your eyes. But Jesus says, nope, it's written, man shall worship the Lord your God and serve him only. See, I truly believe this. I believe that anything that we face in life, Jesus has already faced. And he has already conquered. That's what I believe. So for us to sit here and say, well, I don't think he really knows where I'm at. I have to believe that he does. Because he's faced temptation. He's faced distractions. He's faced these battles. But Satan didn't stop with Jesus, because he continues to attack us in this way. He tries to get us to love the world. So let's look at these three things really quickly, okay? These are going to be pretty bold, I'll just tell you. When I write these things and when I feel like God speaks things, or when I find things that I add to all this stuff, I don't know who's going to be here. I don't know people's situations. In the moment, this is what God gave me. So here we go. The first one is the lust of the flesh. And I know that it means so much more than where I'm going. I get that this is a big, wide open thing. But for the context of today, this is where I'm going. Okay? So just love me and stay with me. Because today I want to talk about sexual lust. Lust of the flesh. Because so many spiritual warriors fall into sexual temptation that destroys them and destroys the people around them. It is that vicious. And Satan understands it. And if you're one that is battling this right now, battling some kind of sexual sin or sexual temptation, can I just tell you, you're not alone. Because sometimes in this one, it's the quiet one. It's the one that everyone hides and everyone kind of puts to the back, leaves in the closet. And we don't talk about it. We don't confess it. We don't do any of that. And then sometimes we feel like we're on this little old island all by ourselves, and we're the only one that struggles with stuff like that. And can I just, you're not alone. And this isn't a man thing. It's a man and woman thing. It's a people thing. And Satan tempts people all the time in this way, with the lust of the flesh. Some of the greatest warriors who ever have lived have had to fight these battles. One of them, in a very well-known story in the Old Testament, good old King David, a man after God's own heart. I mean, the man of all mans, the one that was closest to God as probably anybody at that time. God looked down on David and said, that's my boy. And he had this relationship. He was a good king. He was a good leader. And the scripture says, in the springtime, when men went to war, that's how the story starts off. So that tells you right there that David was not where he was supposed to be. He had chosen not to be where he was supposed to be. Because he was the leader. He was the king. He should have been leading that. He should have been on the front lines. But he had abandoned his post and for some reason stayed behind, and the world got him. He stayed in Jerusalem. He wasn't where he was supposed to be. Therefore, he saw something he wasn't supposed to see, which led him to think something that he wasn't supposed to think, which led him to do something that he wasn't supposed to do, which led him to lose something that he wasn't supposed to lose. Why? Because initially he was where he wasn't supposed to be. I mean, it all goes back to that moment. And in that moment, not being where he's supposed to be, I can just kind of picture Satan kind of standing off in the distance because he'd stayed behind. He'd put himself in that position. Here's good old David, good old King David, close to God, walks out on that balcony, wherever that was, that rooftop, and Satan's back there going, just one dart. Ooh. Oh. And then there was Bathsheba. And he was glued on. Says she was beautiful. So Satan got him with the first one, distracted, but then he was glued. Tells these guys, go get her for me. So they go get her. Bring her back. Ultimately, he gets her pregnant. Ends up killing her husband. Because he was not where he was supposed to be. And it led to one little distraction led him to a road that he did not intend to go down. You know, sometimes we think, and I hear people joke, I do, I'm just looking. Man, just one little glance can lead you to a place. And you know, I hear people joke and laugh about it, but it's not funny. I mean, it's not. Maybe this morning, maybe it's your computer that distracts you. You're at home alone, and maybe it's what's the big deal? I'm not hurting anyone. It's a distraction, and then that one-time distraction, when controlled by Satan, becomes a lifelong distraction, and I will actually say it becomes an addiction. And it's just like any other addiction. It's something that you got to have. You're trying to get back to that very first moment, that very first glance, that very first feeling, and you can't do it. But to try, you do it more, and it will grip you. It will consume you. It will control you in every way that it can. Because you were in a place that you weren't supposed to be. And you know something? It's anyone. No one is above that. 64% of pastors, both male and female pastors, have admitted to either at one time in their ministry having a porn addiction or currently have one. It is a serious distraction. Now, the good news is this: you can defeat it, but you can't do it alone. You can get past it. You can heal from it. But listen, it's real. The lust of the flesh, anything that gets our eyes off of Christ and gets our eyes focused on something else just in that moment of distraction. But listen, sometimes it doesn't stop with the distraction, just like it didn't with David. It led to so many worse things. And with something like that, it's just like one thing. And before long, it's not just a computer screen. It becomes an individual. And then we go way past the boundaries of where we ever thought we would go. And then our lives seem destroyed. We destroy relationships in our marriages and families and all these different things. And it's hard. And then we're left to deal. Can we come back from those? Absolutely. God can restore us. Read Psalms chapter 51. If you're here today and maybe that's a struggle that you have and you wonder, how can I ever be fixed? How can I ever be the person that I'm supposed to be? How can I ever get past this? Go read Psalms chapter 51. It tells you. And you can. And I'll show you how again here in just a second. It's a real fight. It's a real battle. It's a real distraction. Let's face it. Some of you, maybe you're battling that right now. You can't do it on your own. You got to do it with God. You got to do it with people. Maybe some of you need to go confess some things to the appropriate person. And I know that's a tough thing to confess, but you know what? Maybe you need to do that. I don't know. You can do it. The second one's called the lust of the eyes. And once again, I know this could go in a lot of different directions, but today we're going to talk about materialistic lusts, okay? Materialistic things. And this is when a warrior's not satisfied with what he has, and more things or something else makes him, he thinks will make him happy. The lust of the eyes, we can make that about money. I need more money. I need more of this. I need a bigger house. I need a bigger car. It needs to be bigger, shinier, faster, whatever. I need this, and if I get this, then I'm going to be satisfied. If I get this, then my life will be complete. If I could just have this, then all my worries will be fixed. All my problems will be fixed. If I just had more money, then everything would be fine, right? Doesn't everyone say that? I say it all the time because the bill comes in on Tuesday that you can't pay on Tuesday, and then the next bill that you weren't expecting comes in on Wednesday. You're already in debt. Your bank account's already empty. You are broke completely, and you're just like, if I just had more money, my problems would be fixed. I don't care how much money you have. I don't care if you're the richest person in this world. You still have problems. Now, I would love to have more money. I would love to have more stuff. There's nothing wrong with having stuff, but keep your stuff in perspective. Because the stuff that you own, if you don't keep it in perspective, it will own you. And that's exactly what Satan wants to happen in your life. He will attack you, distract you with the lust of the eyes. You will see something that you think that you need when you can't afford it. And now they have these wonderful things and have for years that gets people so sucked in trouble, and they're called credit cards. Well, I don't have the money, but that plastic has the money. You're just like a little kid, you don't have the money. Can we go get this? No, why? I don't have no money. But you've got a card. Just swipe it. We live in the swipe the card world, and it's all good once we get it. But then a month or 2 months down the road when we are broke and we're trying to pay the bill that matters, and then we look back. We did that with a truck one time. We thought we had to have this big old nice Chevy truck. You remember that truck, baby? Yeah, she says it was her truck. It was my truck. Just making that clear right now, baby. Yeah. She got distracted. We thought we needed this truck. I remember, and one of them, and I won't use the name, but the car lot comes down here, and they bring them cars and sell all that stuff. They do that every year. And I'm driving through, and we've had the minivan. I don't want no minivan. And we drove through, and here was this nice midnight blue Chevy 4x4, the big, extended cab. We could fit all our family in this, and this would be great. And the payment was astronomical. But somehow we convinced ourselves that we could make it. So we bought it. You go in, think, I don't know if my credit's going to be good. Oh, your credit is perfect. Sign on the line. And it got bad. We were so far the other way. You know how you kind of go over what, your payments more than what your vehicle's owed, and you just can't get out from underneath it. And when we knew we couldn't afford it, the gas, the payment, the insurance, we couldn't get out of it, and we were stuck. Well, we still had the 4x4 Chevy pickup, which, by the way, we ended up trading in and losing a lot of money on a Chevy Impala, didn't we? Is that what we got? At least it wasn't a minivan, although we ended up buying a minivan shortly thereafter. Satan will make things look so good, appealing to the eye. But when the stuff becomes more than just stuff, then the stuff owns you. You need to stop thinking that you'll be a better husband or a better father or a better man, a better wife, a better mother, whatever, based on stuff. We wrongly get our identity by what we accumulate and what we accomplish. And it's a destructive lie. Once again, there's nothing wrong with stuff. There's nothing wrong with working hard, and there's nothing wrong with money. Just keep it in perspective. Don't let it become a distraction and give the enemy a chance to the third attack, really quickly, of the evil one on every single person who has ever lived is the pride of life. The boasting of what we have or what we've done. And for the purpose of today, I'm going to call this self-made pride. And this is where we start to think, oh, this is about me. It's all about me. I'm the man, I'm the woman. Oh, I've got this God stuff going on, but God, this one's just a little bit out of your league, so I'm going to take care of this one because I want it done right, and for it to be done right, I have to be in control. And we do that. We know God. We've seen God. He's worked in our life, and we get that. But this is one of those distractions that Satan will use. He will get us to think that, oh, it's not God, it's you. You did this. He didn't do this. He didn't get involved in this. You did this. You worked hard to make that money. You worked hard to get this. It's yours. You did this. And then we get to believing that. And what does the Bible say comes before a fall? Pride. The wrong kind of pride. I don't care. Listen, we get to thinking it's all about us. I promise you there'll be a moment in our lives when God reminds us who it's about. He will remind us. There will be things that happen because it's not all about us. We want to be in control. We want to be in charge. We want it to be about us. And then all of a sudden, we start to think that we're good and we've accomplished this and we've achieved this, and we start to boast about it, what we have, what we do. And we slip into this self-made pride. I'm going to make a really bold statement here in this particular situation. Sometimes as Christians we get all caught up in all this and call ourselves believer all day long, but honestly, man, if we're not loving God and loving others first, then we're messed up. I mean, seriously. The Bible doesn't say love all your stuff with all of your heart or with all your... He says love God and then love others. Upward relationships, outward relationships. Keep these in order, and then the stuff just comes along. It's cool. I love the stuff that... I don't have much stuff, but the stuff that I have, I enjoy. I do. I love stuff. Last year I broke down and finally got to buy my a set of golf clubs that I really wanted. I hadn't had a set since I was younger, and we had not been married very long, and God told me to quit the game. The game had become something that it was never meant to be to me. I was consumed by it. I was good. I played it all the time. I traveled a lot. I made money off of it. God told me to quit it, and I didn't quit. And I came home one day to get my clubs out of my storage shed in the house that we lived in. And they were gone. Gone. It was the only thing in my storage shed that was gone. It hadn't been broken into. They were gone. I was so mad. I was mad because they weren't cheap. Back then, I had a lot of money in these things. I'd been fitted for them. They were mine. Well, God spoke to me. I didn't play for 3 years. 3 years. And then I remember one day my brother called me about 3 years after that and said, hey, me and so-and-so are going to go play. You want to go play? I said, I don't have clubs. He said, well, I've got some old beaters. Why don't you just go play with us? So I went and played. And it was fun. And so I came home and I got this feeling like, okay, God's going to let me do this again. And He did. And I wanted to go out and buy the best that there possibly was, because in that moment, and I just felt like God said, nah, you'll be okay. Just enjoy the opportunity when I give it to you. I ended up playing with my brother. He ended up giving me those old beater clubs that were copies, and I still have them. They're in my shed. My son plays with them every now and then. And that's 15, 16 years ago. 17 years ago, something like that. And last year, I really felt like, okay, it's my time. It was the right way, the right thing. It was a blessing. I don't know where that story come from. It's about God. There was a movie many years ago. Let me finish with this. I'm going to tell you how to do this really quick. There was a movie many years ago, and it was called For the Love of the Game. Kevin Costner was in it. Some of you may have saw it. He was a pitcher. Okay, he was 40 years old, 40-ish. And so he's out there, and all these voices are coming from everywhere. You're no good. You're too old. You can't do this. You're not good enough. Booze. And the only way he could focus, he had developed this mental exercise that when he would hear all these negative things, he would say to himself, clear the mechanism. Clear the mechanism. You stink. Clear the mechanism. You're terrible. Clear the mechanism. All these attacks coming from all around. All these voices telling him he couldn't do it. that he wasn't good enough. But in that moment, clear the mechanism. And in that moment, he would succeed. There's reality in that cheesy little illustration. Because attacks are real, they're heavy, they weigh on us, they get in our mind, they get in our heart. Sometimes it's easy to chase those distractions. Clear the mechanism. But Pastor Ron, how do I do that? Well, here again is one of those verses that, seems simple. In Hebrews chapter 12, verse 1, it says, "Let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that entangles us." Isn't it so crazy how quickly we can become entangled in sin? But the writer just simply says, throw it all off. Let it all go. And in verse 2, he says, "Let us fix our eyes on Jesus." Clear the mechanism and focus on the thing that matters. The author and the perfecter of our faith. Clear the mechanism. I shared a verse a couple weeks ago in Ezekiel chapter 22, verse 30 says, "I looked for a man," this was God, he said, "I looked for a man among them who would build up a wall and stand before me in the gap on behalf of the land, so I would not have to destroy it. But I found none." He said, "I looked for someone with integrity, someone of valor, someone of strength. I looked for a godly person, one who would stand up for that which is right and fight valiantly against that which is wrong." By the way, that's hard to do. You ever find yourself in a situation where you know what you're fighting for is right, and you're just getting pelted from every direction? You know how hard it is to keep fighting? But God says, "I'm looking for somebody." But in this verse, he says, "I can't find one." God may search through our church today, in this moment, and may say, "I'm looking for such a person whose word is their bond, a person who cannot be bought, a person who would lay down their life for their spouse or for their family or for their friends, a person who would rise above the lower things of this world, a person committed to whatever God says whenever he says it." What would he find? So my challenge to you today is simply this. I hope that verse becomes something real to you today. And I hope when you hear it or when you read it from this day forward, the reality of that verse becomes this: that when he looks, he will find one, and you will be that one. I hope I can be that one. See, Satan will distract you in every way that he can: lust of the flesh, lust of the eyes, pride of life, to get our eyes unfixed off of Jesus and his purpose and will in our life. And if he can do that, then he has a chance to send us down a road that we don't want to go. But we keep our eyes fixed on Jesus, the author and the perfecter of our faith. And today you can become the one in this battle. You may have to clear the mechanism many, many, many times. You may have to fight against some of those distractions, but you can do it. You can be the one who falls so in love with God and in his kingdom that the world loosens its grip on you. You can be the one who can make an eternal difference because you're an overcomer by the blood of the Lamb and the word of your testimony. You can be the one who is strong and courageous and who stands up to your enemy in those times of battle and fights as a warrior created by God. You are a spiritual warrior. Don't settle for anything